I always wondered what a broken heart actually felt like. Now I know it feels like standing in the rain outside a rooftop lounge, watching your husband of 9 years kiss another woman through the glass. It feels like your lungs collapsing, while everyone around you breathes just fine. It feels like dying but being forced to stay alive and smile that Thursday night. I wasn't supposed to find out anything. I was just a burned-out financial advisor trying to survive another week, but life has a cruel sense of humor. Doesn't it? Working late again? Babe, big investor meeting? Don't wait up? That's what Lucas's text said. The same message he'd sent 3 times that month. The same meeting that apparently needed his best cologne and the leather strap watch I'd given him for our anniversary. I believed him until I didn't, until Natalie from HR accidentally copied me on an email confirming his regular Thursday lunch meeting on a day. He told me he was in Denver. One lie unraveled everything. That's the thing about trust. It's a house of cards. Pull one out and you start noticing all the others trembling. I hired a private investigator the next day. Dramatic? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. Within a week I had a name. Jasmine Clark, 34, brand strategist at a rival agency. I had photos of dinners, beach walks, and hotel visits. I even had audio, which I never listened to all the way. Some wounds you choose not to inflict. But that didn't stop the sound of imagined betrayals from echoing in my head at night. I'd lie awake, haunted by possibilities. How many lies had I swallowed? How many business trips were actually weekend getaways? I replayed every moment. The quick showers, the silences at dinner, the subtle withdrawal of affection. Suddenly, nothing felt real. My entire marriage became a riddle I was too scared to finish. That night, as I scrolled through the evidence, something caught my eye in one of the photos. Jasmine was opening a gift, a small blue box that looked painfully familiar. I zoomed in, my hands shaking. It was the Tiffany necklace I'd found in Lucas's browser history last month. The one he'd convinced me was a surprise for our next anniversary. I laughed until I cried, then I just cried. Not just for the betrayal, but for how easily I had dismissed my own instincts. For how desperately I'd wanted to believe him. For every time I gaslit myself into silence just to keep the peace. The investigator had also mentioned something about a big event planned for this Friday. Jasmine's birthday dinner at Le Bellamy, that new French bistro uptown with a 3-month reservation list. The place I'd been hinting about. Wanting to try, the one Lucas said was overpriced and snobby. I was about to close my laptop when a notification popped up, a new email from the investigator with one final detail. He'd uncovered Jasmine's parents' phone number, pulled from an emergency contact form at her fitness studio. Thought this might be useful, he wrote. Most affairs thrive in secrecy. Secrecy. That word echoed in my head. I sat there staring at that number, something shifting inside me. The tears dried on my face. A strange calm settled in, replacing the chaos that had lived inside me for weeks. It was like watching myself from outside my body. As I picked up the phone and dialed, "Hello, is this Mrs. Clark?" I asked. My voice was surprisingly steady. "You don't know me, but I need to talk to you about your daughter, Jasmine." The conversation that followed changed everything. They didn't know about Lucas. They didn't know their daughter was involved with a married man. They'd been told Lucas was Jasmine's boss, recently divorced and such a gentleman. Mrs. Clark actually thanked me for calling. They'd been wondering why Jasmine had been so secretive about her new relationship. "We're flying in to surprise her for her birthday, this Friday," Mrs. Clark said excitedly. "She thinks we couldn't make it, but we've been planning this for months. Her brothers are coming too." I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not pain, not quite rage, but something cold and calculating that I barely recognized. "What a coincidence," I heard myself say. I was planning to surprise them at dinner too. Jasmine's been such an important part of Lucas's life. Perhaps we could coordinate. As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were different. Harder, focused. Lucas came home late that night, smelling of unfamiliar perfume and well-worn lies. He kissed my forehead and asked if I'd eaten dinner. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Actually, I've been making plans for Friday night, something special." "Friday." His face flickered, with panic before settling into that practiced concern. "Honey, I have that business dinner, remember? The Denver investors are flying in. I told you last week, I nodded sympathetically. Of course I forgot. Work is so important. He looked relieved as he headed for the shower, already pulling out his phone to text, probably her. Probably to tell her how he'd once again handled his inconvenient wife. Little did he know, Friday night would be special. Indeed, just not for the reasons he thought. The thing about betrayal is how it forces you to rewrite your entire history. Every memory becomes suspect. Every I love you, potentially fraudulent. The night Lucas proposed under the stars in Lake Tahoe. Now I wondered if he'd rehearsed those lines with someone else. Our wedding day. I scanned old photos, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that should have warned me. I found them everywhere. The late nights that began 3 years ago, the business trips that left no receipts, the sudden password updates on his phone, all because of work security. The new wardrobe, the personal trainer. The classic signs that every betrayed spouse somehow overlooks until it's too late. But the worst realization? How Lucas had begun subtly eroding me, right when the affair started. Quiet comments about my career goals being a little much. Questions about whether my anxiety medication was making me paranoid. Little nudges that maybe I was too emotional when I called out the distance between us. "You never used to be so clingy," he'd say when I asked where he'd been. "This isn't attractive, Cora." I actually apologized. I tried harder to be less needy. I went to therapy to work on my trust issues, all while he was building a second life with Jasmine. I twisted myself into versions of a woman I thought he wanted, softer, quieter, more accommodating, just to keep a love that was already rotting from the inside. I doubted myself before I ever doubted him. Thursday night, the eve of it all, I couldn't sleep. I found myself doing something I'd sworn I wouldn't, scrolling through Jasmine's social media. I had stayed away from that spiral of self-destruction until now, but suddenly, I needed to see her. My enemy. Her Instagram was a carefully curated highlight reel of empowerment and freedom. Vacation photos in places Lucas had always told me were out of our budget. Designer bags, quotes about knowing your worth and refusing to settle. And there he was, cropped just enough to escape most eyes but not mine. His watch, his shoulder, the back of his head. I had given that man everything. My 20s, my chance at children, the inheritance that launched his startup when no bank would. My loyalty through his father's funeral, through every failed pitch and late bill. I had sacrificed pieces of my identity for his dreams, built our life while he quietly built an escape route. And what had Jasmine given him? Thrill, novelty, freedom from responsibility. A fantasy where he could pretend to be someone else. I explained everything while she listened, eyes wide with horrified fascination. "You're not seriously going through with this, are you?" she asked when I finished. "Watch me," I said. "At least let me come." "For moral support," she insisted. "I'll sit at the bar and be your getaway driver if things go south." I hugged her, grateful for the first authentic offer of support I'd felt in months. Throughout the day, Lucas texted, his usual excuses about late meetings and client dinners. I replied with loving messages, playing the part of the unsuspecting wife one last time. At 5 p.m., I left the office and headed to the salon. If I was going to burn my life down, I wanted to look incredible doing it. Fresh highlights, a facial, nails the color of blood. The stylist asked what the occasion was. "I'm reclaiming my life tonight," I said simply. Back home, I opened a jewelry box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was my grandmother's diamond pendant. Something old, something valuable, something untouched by Lucas. I held it for a moment longer than necessary, the weight of it grounding me, reminding me I came from strength, from survival, that I had weathered storms before, even if this one had a different name. I put it on, then applied my makeup with precision. Red lips, smoky eyes, war paint. Not to hide, but to reveal the woman I'd nearly forgotten. The one who didn't beg to be chosen, but stood tall when someone tried to erase her. Just before I left, I received a final message from Mrs. Clark. "We're all set. Jasmine's brothers, Tyler and Mason, are taking an Uber straight from their hotel. We'll meet you at the restaurant at 7:45 for the 8 p.m. surprise." I texted back confirmation, then called Sophia. "It's showtime," I said. The Uber ride to La Bellamy felt dreamlike. The driver kept peeking at me through the rearview mirror. "Special night?" he asked. I met his eyes. "You have no idea." What most people don't realize about planning the perfect revenge is that it's not about acting on impulse. It's about patience, strategy, and the willingness to sit in your pain long enough to turn it into something powerful. For 3 days after learning of Lucas's betrayal, I hadn't confronted him. Instead, I watched. I prepared. While coordinating with Jasmine's family, I had also taken care of a few other matters. First, financial. Lucas and I shared accounts, but I'd always maintained a private savings account. My mother had insisted, just in case. Mother's intuition, maybe. I transferred every paycheck from the past 3 months into that account. Second, legal. A quiet consultation with a divorce attorney, ironically, the same one who had represented the wife of Lucas's old business partner. She remembered Lucas too well. He'd testified against her client, painting the wife as unstable and irresponsible. He's a convincing liar, the lawyer had warned me. We'll need evidence. Evidence? I had plenty. The night before the confrontation, I backed up every message, every photo, every email from the investigator. Then I accessed our shared cloud storage, where I found a folder labeled Tax Docs 2018. It held nothing remotely tax-related. Instead, it was packed with hundreds of photos and videos of Lucas and Jasmine together, spanning 3 years. He hadn't even bothered to hide them. That's how certain he was of my ignorance. But the worst evidence came from an unexpected place. 2 weeks earlier, suspecting something was off, I had installed home security cameras. For safety, I told Lucas. What they captured was him bringing Jasmine into our home. While I was at a conference in Seattle, into our bedroom, onto the bed we'd shared for nearly a decade. That footage now lived in an encrypted folder, ready if needed. I wasn't planning to use it tonight. Public shame would be enough. But for the divorce, all cards were on the table. As my Uber approached the restaurant, I texted Sophia, in position. She replied immediately. At the bar. Can see their table from here. They're already seated, looking cozy. You sure about this? I didn't respond. Of course I wasn't sure. This moment would change everything. Not just my marriage, but how I saw myself. Of course I forgot. Work is so important. He looked relieved as he headed for the shower, already pulling out his phone to text. Probably her. Probably to tell her how he'd once again handled his inconvenient wife. Little did he know, Friday night would be special. Indeed, just not for the reasons he thought. The thing about betrayal is how it forces you to rewrite your entire history. Every memory becomes suspect. Every I love you, potentially fraudulent. The night Lucas proposed under the stars in Lake Tahoe. Now I wondered if he'd rehearsed those lines with someone else. Our wedding day. I scanned old photos, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that should have warned me. I found them everywhere. The late nights that began 3 years ago. The business trips that left no receipts. The sudden password updates on his phone. All because of work security. The new wardrobe, the personal trainer. The classic signs that every betrayed spouse somehow overlooks until it's too late. But the worst realization? How Lucas had begun subtly eroding me, right when the affair started. Quiet comments about my career goals being a little much. Questions about whether my anxiety medication was making me paranoid. Little nudges that maybe I was too emotional when I called out the distance between us. You never used to be so clingy, he'd say when I asked where he'd been. This isn't attractive, Cora. I actually apologized. I tried harder to be less needy. I went to therapy to work on my trust issues, all while he was building a second life with Jasmine. Thursday night, the eve of it all, I couldn't sleep. I found myself doing something I'd sworn I wouldn't, scrolling through Jasmine's social media. I had stayed away from that spiral of self-destruction until now. But suddenly, I needed to see her. My enemy. Her Instagram was a carefully curated highlight reel of empowerment and freedom. Vacation photos in places Lucas had always told me were out of our budget. Designer bags. Quotes about knowing your worth and refusing to settle. And there he was, cropped just enough to escape most eyes, but not mine. His watch. His shoulder. The back of his head. I had given that man everything. My 20s, my chance at children, the inheritance that launched his startup when no bank would. My loyalty through his father's funeral, through every failed pitch and late bill. And what had Jasmine given him? Thrill. Novelty. Freedom from responsibility. A fantasy where he could pretend to be someone else. Let me go first. I want to see Lucas's face when he sees me. She nodded, thrilled by what she thought was friendly coordination. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. My red dress caught the light. My grandmother's diamonds sparkled at my collarbone. "Happy birthday, Jasmine," I said, loud and clear. Lucas's head snapped up. Our eyes locked. In that single moment, his expression cycled through confusion, shock, and pure, bone-deep terror. Jasmine turned, frowning at the interruption, not yet placing me from the brief encounters we'd had at agency functions. "I'm sorry," she began. "Do I? Cora?" Lucas choked, half rising from his chair. "What are you? How did you?" "Surprise," I said softly, just as Jasmine's family stepped forward into view behind me. "Mom? Dad?" Jasmine gasped, her face going pale. "What are you doing here?" And that's when the real show began. "Who's Cora?" Jasmine's mother asked, looking between us, her excitement fading into puzzled concern. "I'm Lucas's wife," I said, my voice just loud enough to catch the attention of nearby diners. "His wife of 9 years. The silence that followed was total. Jasmine froze, champagne glass suspended midair. Lucas stood still, like a man facing a firing squad. "Wife?" Jasmine's father repeated, his jovial face darkening. "Lucas, you told us you were divorced." "Recently divorced," Jasmine's mother corrected, her tone tightening. "You said the papers were finalized last year." Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it again, like a fish drowning in air. "I can explain," he started. But Jasmine's brother Tyler stepped forward, his voice sharp and low. "Explain what?" "How you've been lying to our sister and her entire family." "Jasmine, did you know he was married?" Every eye turned to her. This was the moment I'd both feared and waited for, to find out if she was a victim or an accomplice. "Of course not," she insisted. But her eyes darted toward Lucas in silent panic. "A giveaway." I asked quietly, pulling out my phone. "So you weren't in our house 2 weeks ago? In our bed, while I was at a finance conference in Seattle?" Jasmine paled even further. "You knew," I continued, keeping my tone even. "You've known for at least a year. The day you called our landline, and I answered. Remember? You hung up, but not before asking for Lucas by name." The room was no longer pretending not to watch. A waiter stood frozen nearby. Sophia had moved closer, phone discreetly recording. "Is this true?" Jasmine's father demanded, his face dark with fury. Jasmine's eyes brimmed with tears. "He said they were separated, that she knew, and was just staying for appearances." "Appearances," I laughed. The sound brittle even to my own ears. Like the appearance of me working 60-hour weeks to fund his startup? Or the appearance of me helping him through depression last year, while he was apparently building a future with you? My voice shook, not with weakness, but with the weight of every sacrifice I had made for a man who used my devotion as camouflage. I had stood by him through every dark season, only to realize I was never part of the light he was chasing. Lucas finally found his voice. "Cora, please, not here." "Where then, Lucas? In our marriage counseling sessions, where you claimed to be reconnecting with yourself? Or maybe in our bed, where you made love to me last week? Was that just for show too?" Jasmine let out a small, wounded sound. "Last week? You said you hadn't touched her in months." "He lied," I said simply. "That's what he does. To both of us." Jasmine's brothers had closed in around her protectively, both glaring at Lucas with open contempt. "You brought him to Mom's anniversary party," Mason said to Jasmine. "Introduced him to our entire family, our friends." "I didn't know," she insisted, but her voice faltered. There it was, that flicker of recognition, of shame, buried beneath her carefully polished confidence. I didn't feel satisfaction in that moment. Only a heavy, quiet ache. Because knowing didn't make any of this easier. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small bundle of photos, carefully chosen from the investigator's file. 3 years, I said, sliding them across the table. That's how long this has been going on. Here's you two at the Madison Towers Hotel last March. Here's the weekend in Napa while I was at the hospital with my sister post-surgery. And here's Christmas Eve, when Lucas told me he was stuck late at the office. Jasmine's mother picked up the photos, gasping as she flipped through them. "Jasmine Olivia Clark. How could you?" "Mom, please don't mom me. We raised you better than this." She turned to me then, her eyes full of shame. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Lucas tried to seize control. This is a private matter. No reason to involve. Private?" Jasmine's father cut in. "You made it our business when you lied to my family, sat at our table, accepted our hospitality under false pretenses. And when you used company resources to fund your affair," I added coolly. The Madison Towers receipts were billed to your corporate card, the same business account I helped set up, the one where I'm still legally listed as CFO. Lucas's face went pale. This was new to him, that I'd been quietly tracking the finances for weeks. That's not fraud. It's not misappropriation of company funds. Yes, it is. Your investors might be very interested in how their funds are being misused. A small crowd had gathered by now, whispers spread across the restaurant like wildfire. Someone was definitely recording. You're making a scene, Lucas hissed under his breath. Desperate. No, you made the scene, Jasmine's brother Mason said, stepping in closer to Lucas. For 3 years, apparently. I'd like you to leave, Jasmine said suddenly, not looking at either of us. Both of you, please. Sweetheart, her mother began, but Jasmine cut her off. I can't do this. Not here. Not now. I felt a strange twist of sympathy for her. Despite it all, we were both victims of the same man's selfishness. I'll go, I said softly. But first, I turned to Lucas, who was frantically texting someone beneath the table. I reached out and calmly took the phone from his hands. Your lawyer can wait, I said, glancing at the screen. Mine already filed. You'll be served on Monday. Lucas's face contorted. You vindictive. You planned all this. The slur hung in the air, exposing his true self for anyone who still had doubts. No, Lucas, you planned this. The first time you decided to lie. I'm just delivering the logical conclusion. I turned to Jasmine's family. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But if it helps, he was lying to me about you, just as much as he lied to you about me. Jasmine's father nodded, jaw tight. Thank you for your courage, young lady. We'll handle things from here. Right on cue, Sophia appeared at my side. Car's waiting, she whispered. I took one last look at the scene. Lucas cornered, Jasmine unraveling, her family pulling together to shield her, and shut him out. The birthday cake still sat untouched nearby, candles unlit. Happy birthday, Jasmine, I said again, this time without bitterness. I hope the next year brings better choices. As Sophia and I turned and walked away, I heard Jasmine's father start in on Lucas. As for you, Lucas, we need to have a serious talk about your conduct, both personal and professional. Outside, the night air hit my face like freedom. Sophia squeezed my arm. You okay? No, I said honestly, but I will be. My phone buzzed, notifications lighting up the screen. The restaurant showdown was already trending locally on social media. Birthday. Surprise and cheater exposed were both gaining traction. I shut off my phone. The public validation could wait. Tonight was never about going viral. It was about truth, consequences, and most importantly, about me finally standing in my power after years of being diminished. The car pulled away from the curb just as I saw Lucas burst out of the restaurant, red-faced and frantic. He spotted me and ran a few steps after the car, shouting something I couldn't hear. I didn't look back. 6 months after what social media dubbed the birthday reckoning, life had settled into a new rhythm. Not easier necessarily, but clearer, more honest. The divorce finalized faster than expected. Lucas, now facing potential fraud charges after our public confrontation triggered a financial audit, had agreed to generous terms just to avoid further scrutiny. Sometimes public humiliation comes with unexpected financial perks. I sold the house too. Too many memories haunted those walls. I moved into a downtown apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, and not a single trace of my past life. The first night alone, I cried until my throat burned. The grief came in waves, laced with relief. It was mourning the death of a shared future, of every plan, every promise. I curled into myself that night, afraid I'd broken something too deep to fix. The second night, I slept better than I had in years. Jasmine reached out, surprisingly, about a month after everything blew up. We met at a quiet coffee shop far from anywhere familiar. I knew, she admitted quickly. Not at first, but eventually. He always said he was going to leave you. Next month. Always next month. There's always a reason to wait, I replied. She looked different, smaller, somehow less polished. My family hasn't forgiven me. My brothers barely speak to me. I didn't feel any satisfaction in her sadness. They will. Eventually. Why did you do it that way, she asked. You could have just confronted him in private. I considered the question. I spent years being gaslit, made to feel like I was crazy. I needed witnesses. And honestly, I thought you deserved to know who you were really with. She nodded slowly. The videos from that night, they're still out there. My company's social media manager says they'll probably never vanish completely. I know. I'm sorry about that part. Don't be, she said, a flicker of her former confidence sparking. It was humiliating but necessary. And for what it's worth, he was doing the same thing to me. He did to you, making me question my memory, chip away at my self-worth, twist every conversation to suit his version of events. We parted with an awkward handshake that turned into a brief hug, bound momentarily by the shared damage inflicted by the same man. Lucas tried contacting me several times after the divorce. First in anger, then with pleas and bargaining, eventually with teary confessions and promises of transformation. I never replied. Some endings require no further conversation. Sophia insisted on throwing me a rebirth party for my 35th birthday. I resisted until she pointed out that it would mark exactly 1 year since the confrontation. Reclaim the date, she said. Make it yours, not theirs. So I did. We reserved a cozy restaurant, not La Bellamy, and I invited only the people who had stood by me through the hardest year of my life. My team at work, who shielded me from office gossip. My therapist, who sat through the waves of rage and grief without ever rushing me. My mother, who flew in once a month just to sit beside me in silence when words failed. They didn't just witness my pain, they honored it. They didn't try to fix me or tell me to move on. They simply stayed. And in that staying, I found pieces of myself I thought were lost for good. Late in the evening, as the room buzzed with conversation and easy laughter, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. You were right about everything. I'm getting help now. Not asking for forgiveness, just wanted you to know. I showed it to Sophia, who waited for my reaction. Good for him, I said at last, slipping the phone back into my purse without replying. And good luck to whoever loves him next. You're not even a little curious? She asked. About Lucas? No, and I meant it. My detective days are over. The truth was, I hadn't thought about him in weeks. The fury that had carried me through the divorce had burned out completely, leaving something unexpected behind. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet, but a steady knowing that I would get there. Later that night, I stood on my balcony watching the city breathe beneath me. My grandmother's diamond pendant, the one I wore that night at the restaurant, caught the moonlight. I touched it gently, a reflex now, a reminder of the woman who had endured her own storms and still stood tall. I had spent so long measuring my worth by someone else's validation that I'd forgotten how solid it feels to belong fully to yourself. The pendant wasn't just a keepsake anymore. It was a symbol of my lineage, of resilience passed down like a whispered legacy. People sometimes ask if I regret the confrontation, if I wish I had handled it with more grace. They miss the point entirely. Grace wasn't in the explosion. It was in the rebuild. In choosing not to shrink for someone else's lies, in standing tall in my truth and saying, enough. Sometimes I think of that woman I saw in the mirror the night before everything shattered, the one with sharp, determined eyes. I barely knew her then. She saved me. She wasn't born from vengeance. She was born from self-respect, long buried but not gone. I don't need revenge anymore. But I'll never forget what it taught me, that under all my capacity for love lies an equal strength for justice. And that truth, however late, always rises, like water, like breath, like freedom. So the story is over, dear friends. And if you're still here, still reading at this hour, then something in this journey has touched you, maybe even opened something inside you. Maybe it made you pause. Maybe it made you remember a time you too had to gather your strength, face the truth, and begin again. This story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about reclaiming yourself after being told for too long that your voice didn't matter. It's about how healing begins, not with justice served, but with dignity restored. As Brené Brown once said, owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we'll ever do. And that's what Cora did. That's what so many of us are doing. Quietly, daily, reclaiming lost parts of ourselves. Because real closure doesn't come from watching someone else fall. It comes from standing tall in your own truth, refusing to shrink any longer for someone else's comfort. And yes, it hurts. But on the other side of that pain, there is clarity. There is freedom. So if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been gaslit, underestimated, betrayed, or just felt like you had to hold yourself together when everything was falling apart, know this. You are not alone. You are not broken. and you will rise too. If this spoke to you, I hope you'll like, share, and subscribe, not just to support this space, but to send a signal to others out there, quietly surviving their own storms. Let's make sure no one walks through their hardest moment thinking they're the only one. And if you're on your own balcony tonight, watching your city breathe like she did at the end, may you know this in your bones. You are worthy, you are whole, and the life ahead is still yours to write.